As another holiday season winds down, it makes me reflect and think about how different the holidays were as a kid compared to being an adult. At the same time, I think of my favorite holiday seasons. There's one in particular that stands out, and that was the holiday season of 1991. This was one of the most memorable ever for me. At this time, all I wanted was a TurboGrafx 16 system. Up until now, I had a Nintendo Entertainment System, and even though it was still great, games were coming out, it was time to move on to the 16-bit generation. On Christmas morning, my parents hooked it up, and sure enough, I received the TurboGrafx 16, and it was amazing. I can still vividly remember it all, and I was so happy that I was blessed with the best gift I can ask for. To make the experience even better, I also received a couple extra games to go with my new 16-bit system. The TurboGrafx 16 had a pack-in game called Keith Courage, and I would also get The Legendary Axe and Bonk's Adventure. Needless to say, this was probably one of my favorite Christmases ever. It's definitely in my top 2 or 3. Of course, being in middle school, I was on school break for the holidays, and I had been delivering newspapers for a few years up to that point, so I saved my money up and I was allowed to buy a couple more games during the winter vacation. This break was turning out to be amazing. I remember going to the mall and went to Babbage's, an electronics boutique, to see which games they had and also to compare the prices. So I bought Taking It to the Hoop and Andre Panza's Kickboxing. This was my first experience owning a 16-bit console. It was literally overnight when my journey began into this new era. And these first 5 games I owned helped reinforce my lifelong love for video games. And this was such an exciting time, and I was able to play many other great games on all of the systems from here on out. My brother had a Sega Genesis, and a few of my friends had Super Nintendos, so I was about to fully immerse myself into the 16-bit era. In today's episode, I want to share with you 5 games that truly are unforgettable to me, despite some of them being unpopular among critics and reviewers. Christmas and the holiday season of 1991 was and will always be an amazing day in my life and forever be linked to my adoration for video games. Perhaps this may even be the reason why I started my lifelong hobby of video games. To me, these games are timeless and some of my favorites ever. So of course, it's about that time. So sit back, relax, and catch a contact off this retro-powered rewind. The first game I played that fateful morning was Keith Courage. I know this is not the best game in the world, and probably not the best choice for the North America pack-in game instead of alternatives like Bonk's Adventure. However, when I went to sleep the night before, there was still a Nintendo hooked up to the television. So, regardless if Keith Courage is good or not, the jump from the Nintendo to the TurboGrafx 16 in one short night was incredible. The character sprites in Keith Courage are large and detailed compared to my NES games. I had a blast playing this that morning, and hearing the music kick in when I started the game up was priceless. It sounded great, controlled great, looked great, and was definitely difficult, so there was always replay value in the hopes of completing the game. The controls are responsive and crisp. In addition, there is hardly any slowdown during the mech suit scenes when there are multiple enemies on screen attacking you. After playing this in recent times, I realize it is actually a decent game. The aesthetics of the game make it look like an anime with all of its characters and bright colors. In my opinion, this was not received well in North America because it is clearly a Japanese game. Between the aesthetics and character models, I think it completely went over the North American audience's head. Keep in mind, at this time, anime was not popular like it is now, and usually was for a niche audience, and people just didn't like it. They thought it was kid stuff, like cartoons. There's a big misconception about it. The North American audience wasn't used to games looking and feeling like this. Of course, this is just my opinion. Overall, I enjoy this game because it is different than what any of us were playing. There's RPG elements, you have NPCs, alternate stages, where you play as a human and then play as the mech suit. There's quality music, exceptional challenge, and in addition, the cover art was exceptional. It looked like a comic book. If my memory serves me correctly, of course this was over 30 years ago, I think it also came with a mini comic book In order to enjoy this game, you definitely have to keep an open mind before you play it. It does get repetitive, but it is what it is. The game released in 1989, and I highly recommend this game if you want to play a game that is unique and not quite like any other games out at the time. After opening what I thought was my final boss gift, I noticed two other small square gifts and thought, oh, could this be games? I had a hunch because all the 16-bit systems had completely different boxes, and the TurboGrafx 16 had square boxes. As I opened the first gift, I remember seeing the spider exposed through the wrapping paper, and I immediately knew what it was. It was one of the best games ever on the TurboGrafx 16. It was The Legendary Axe. A wave of joy and happiness spread throughout me because this was turning out to be a Christmas morning for the ages. If you have never seen the cover of The Legendary Axe, it is truly a piece of art. Now that I think of it, video games and toys back then had the best box art. He-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joe, everything looked hand-drawn for the most part and was creative. The Legendary Axe is one of the flagship titles in the TurboGrafx 16 library. The graphics at the time stand out because of its uniqueness. I can't recall any games looking like this title. The character sprites are detailed, the environment is detailed and bright. You can tell you're in the jungle, you're on cliff sides. My favorite character sprites are the blue axe enemies. The graphics are some of the best in the library and far surpass the NES. This was turning out to be the greatest morning ever. One thing about the PC Engine and TurboGrafx 16 is that they had some classic and some of the best soundtracks of that era. The Legendary Axe does not disappoint in this category. The OST complements the environments and stages throughout the adventure. If you like great chip tunes, then these are some you will enjoy. The controls are done well. You have two jumps, pressure-sensitive jumps. Hold the button for higher, and tap the button for shorter. There is also a power gauge to unleash a devastating strike, or flip the turbo switches for weaker, rapid strikes. Of course, it all depends on the situation. The Legendary Axe is quite challenging, and I think I completed it maybe 3 times, but I'll say I definitely completed it twice. However, that was a long time ago. We're talking 30 plus years. I definitely recommend this title because it is one of the best TurboGrafx 16 games and stands up to the test of time. This is a TurboGrafx 16 title that you could brag about in school to Genesis and Super Nintendo kids. The Legendary Axe is high quality because it is fun and has graphics, sound, gameplay, and challenge that still hold up even today. After opening the Legendary Axe, I knew there was one more, but I was not sure what game it would be. However, I knew whatever it was going to be a great surprise. As I started opening the gift, Bonk's crazy looking face peered through the tear in the wrapping paper, and I knew I had the game that had been capturing my attention in game magazines, specifically in the Turbo Express ad where it shows the big dinosaur's face after Bonk headbutts him. Finally, I had a TurboGrafx 16 and 3 games to boot. This was truly a great day. For the time, Bonk's adventure looked great. The game boasted cartoonish aesthetics, and the sprites were large and bright. There isn't anything special about the backgrounds in this game because they are pretty plain, but the foreground where everything happens always was appealing to me. The first game in the series looks amazing, especially if a day prior to this you were rocking a NES, like I was, I will always say this. The jump from 8-bit to 16-bit graphics was the greatest jump in the history of gaming. I think that now, and I thought that back then. This game, and every game I received this morning, absolutely blew me away because of this difference in technology. If I had to describe Bonk's Adventure's soundtrack, I would say it is a tropical, lo-fi, chill-type beats that you can play in the background and feel relaxed while it incites good vibes. You can blaze up to it or sip on something and kick back and relax. I've always enjoyed this music, and it incites waves of nostalgia of this fateful morning. The sound effects are decent, but the soundtrack is dope. Bonk's Adventure gameplay is great. The controls are responsive, and Bonk moves in a smooth and efficient manner throughout his adventure, regardless if you are flipping through the air, battling enemies, or navigating platforming sections of the stages. The game has a moderate difficulty. It is not easy, but it is not insane mode either. In my opinion, I'd say it has a good balance and can be quite easy in some stages, but then the challenge just ramps up really fast in later stages. Bonk is one of my favorite mascots ever. Perhaps he would have been more popular if he was the pack-in game for the TurboGrafx 16, and sales would have been better to ensure more quality products in the future. However, this was not the case. Regardless, Bonk's Adventure has been a favorite game of mine, and still a game I never get tired of playing, even to this day. It is always fun because of its cooling soundtrack, responsive controls, cartoonish graphics, and perfectly balanced challenge. I highly recommend this original, flagship TurboGrafx 16 exclusive title. When I made the jump to the TurboGrafx 16, I of course wanted to get a sports title. The TV sports series always looked amazing in the screenshots and the magazines, but in reality, I'm not really a fan of them games. So I decided to buy Taking It to the Hoop. Disclaimer: here's where my opinion is most likely unpopular. Taking It to the Hoop is so much fun, and I enjoy this game every time I play it. At the time, in my opinion, the best basketball series was the EA Versus series, Lakers vs. Celtics in particular. Those games were sports simulations with realistic graphics, or if that's what you want to call it for that time. They were licensed by the NBA and had the players' names and some signature moves like Jordan's reverse layup. Taking It to the Hoop is nothing like that, and that was the appeal for me. The graphics in Taking It to the Hoop are cartoonish, but the character sprites are large and detailed. The players even make facial gestures. In the other series, you couldn't even see the players' faces, and the game was much slower moving. Sure, Taking It to the Hoop did not have the cool signature moves, but who cares, so what? It looked great graphically, if you like cartoon aesthetics. The game even had a souped-up version of the double dribble, dunking, and free throw screen. I enjoy the cartoon look and think the players look great for such an old game. The sound is not great, but not terrible either. I would say it is just okay. There are all kinds of sounds represented, even down to the players' sneakers screeching on the court. The sound the basketball makes while bouncing is quite heavy and nothing like basketball. But, like I said, the sound is just okay. It's eh. At this point in time, there were no extra button inputs for dribbling moves, turbo, or anything like that. The controls are simple and straightforward. To shoot the ball, you hit button 2 twice, button 2 once to jump, and button 1 is to pass. If you hit the start button, you can do a pivot move, and on defense, button 1 switches your player, and button 2 helps you steal the ball from your opponent. The game moves pretty quick, with hardly any slowdown. The only thing I would change about this is the time limit of the game. Unfortunately, you can only play a game with full quarters. Sometimes this is too much, and a shorter game would be better, especially if you're pressed for time. One cool aspect is the management side of this game. You can pick 3 different defenses and assign players to any positions you would like to put them at. When you play this game, make sure you have plenty of time on your hands. Once you get the hang of it, it is easy to score. I usually beat the computer by double their score. The key to constantly keeping your score moving forward is to have constant rotations in your roster. If you do this and get the hang of the game, maybe 1 to 2 games, you'll be putting up stats that are ridiculous. I would like to have seen a level system added to the game to increase or decrease the challenge as necessary. Taking it to the hoop has always been a fun experience for me. I have great memories playing this for hours on end. It could be even more fun if you had the turbo tap to play against your friends. It is definitely not the best basketball game ever during the 16-bit generation, but for a system not known for great sports titles, the PC Engine and TurboGrafx 16 delivered a fun arcade-type experience. The Sega Genesis obviously reigns supreme in the sports games sector, but every once in a while another system creates a fun and exciting sports title. In this case, taking it to the hoop is a slam dunk. I recommend this game to anyone that likes non-realistic, cartoonish, fun type of sports games. The final game I purchased over the 1991 holiday Christmas break was Panza Kickboxing. I have always enjoyed this game, but it seems that the collective does not share my sentiment at all. Every review that I have watched seemed to hate on this game big time, and I can't understand why. I'll admit the worst part of the game is the music, because after the title screen it is non-existent. For example, when you have your matches, it is just the sound of the crowd, the ref, and the fighters striking each other. As for fighting games, this was one of the most realistic in terms of look, feel, and attack options. I always thought the graphics looked great, and according to research, the graphics were actually filmed from Panza and other kickboxers themselves, and then digitized. For a game that came out in 1991, the character sprites look amazing and realistic. Their movements are smooth, fluid, and responsive. You can tell when you see the way the fighters strike and defend themselves that there's a sense of realism. When you are climbing the ranks, you start off fighting in a gymnasium with only a handful of spectators. However, eventually after you train, win some matches, rank up, you will fight in packed arenas under the bright lights of show business. You can really get a sense of the difference in atmosphere between the two rankings. In my opinion, this game has graphics that at the time look way better than other titles that have digitized graphics. As mentioned earlier, the sound is a moot point and non-existent. However, the sound effects are decent, and the voiceover from the referee is done fairly well. The strikes create a satisfying thud when connecting with your opponent. The control seems to be the topic of contention. I always thought that this control scheme was pretty good and easy to utilize. It is especially easy on your hands because there is no need to mash any of the buttons. You can train your fighters on resistance, power, and reflexes. The training is as simple as it gets. In order to train for resistance and power, simply put your turbo switch to the highest position, hold down the strike button, and let the fighter do the work. It's as simple as that. As for the reflex skill, is a direction with the corresponding pad that comes out towards you. For example, the top pad, you have to use your high kick, so you simply press up on the D-pad. The down pad, you have to use the down arrow to do a sweep kick. And for the forward pad, you have to press forward for your forward kick. On offense, you have 2 sets of attacks. The first is just to use the D-pad. You can press up, diagonal up and back, diagonal up and forward, diagonal down and back, diagonal down and forward. And the other attack option is to perform the same movements, but to hold button 1, and now you can hit the down button for a sweep attack. And this gives you a total of about 15 different attacks. For the learning curve, it does take a little time to learn, but once you do, it is as straightforward as it gets. The controls are smooth and responsive, and I'm a fan of this design. One tip to be successful in this game: when you're fighting and you get turned around, all you simply gotta do is walk away from your opponent, hit the down button, and your fighter will turn around and face their opponent. This could be really confusing at first. My favorite movesets are moveset number 7. You can choose what movesets you like best, and you can try them out before you start using them in the training stages. The key to overcoming the challenge is to train your fighter constantly, earn money, win against other fighters, then you'll move up the ranks. Now, back in the day when I first got this game, I could beat Andre Panza easily. However, in the past couple years, it has been rare and quite difficult beating the champ and winning all the belts. For example, sometimes I'll fight lower ranking fighters and they'll catch me with a good kick or spin punch, and then all of a sudden, lights out. And that's the other cool thing about it. If you look up in the top left and right corner, you'll see there are literally lights going out, and when you run out of lights, you're KO'd. Overall, the challenge is well above average, but with training and practice, your fighter could become the world champion. I definitely recommend this game, especially for combat sport enthusiasts. At the time, there was no other game like this. You either had to play Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, or any of those other games like this. Now, those games are obviously way better, but in terms of realism and combat, Andre Panza Kickboxing is where it's at. The holiday season of 1991 was certainly a wonderful memory and experience that I have cherished since then and still cherish to this day. Not only was it a great Christmas morning, but what made it all the more special was that I officially embarked on my 16-bit journey, and that journey is still continuing to this day. That was the morning when my lifelong passion and hobby officially began. Don't get me wrong, I always liked video games like the Nintendo and ColecoVision and Atari tremendously, and have wonderful memories of some of the best times in my life, but it was during the 16-bit era when I fully embraced my love of video games. It has endured all these years later, and I still enjoy the games from days past that bring back nostalgia and memories that I will cherish forever. It sure was a great time to be a teenager, immersed in the world of video games.